Happy to introduce Gerald Dalebout. The talk today is Media Literacy, Democracy in the Classroom, and we'll give you a bit of a history, a biography of Gerald. So Gerald Dalebout is a teacher at Moscow High School. He has taught U.S. government since 2011 and has just recently started an elective called Media Literacy and Culture. He was born and raised in Idaho and has lived in Moscow since 2005. He has been married for 17 years to his wife Kate, and they have 3 sons, Liam 14, Finn 10, and Lionel 5. You can learn more about him at his website. Well, the website is on you have it. So, Gerald, would you like to?
Yeah.
And Gerald will take questions at the end.
Yes.
Yeah. It's really a privilege to be here. I really love, the League of Women Voters has essentially helped me as a teacher since I teach U.S. government, and so we do the mock voting. And that has been huge for students just to be aware of, first of all, just how to vote, which gets more and more complicated every year. And then also looking over the data after the fact and getting some insight into the demographics of our county and our city is really powerful. So thanks for all that you do. I'm really glad that you guys have this option to speak. And if anybody ever thinks of any ways to partner with Moscow High School, either in my U.S. government class or this class, let me know. So I'm going to speak for a bit, and teachers can do that really well, but I actually I'm going to give everyone some data here to kind of look at. So in a little bit, we will get into like groups, and just kind of look at some data. So I'm just giving you a heads up. First and foremost, as Francis said, I teach media literacy. We're going to be looking at these questions today, and this is essentially most of what I'm showing you right now is an actual lesson I do with my students in this elective class. I've modified it slightly, but a lot of it is going to be that. We're looking at what effect has new media had on children. We're going to be looking at Jonathan Haidt's book. How many of you have read Jonathan Haidt's Anxious Generation? Okay, so that's good actually, because we're going to talk about it, so I'm glad that actually you don't know very much about what's going on. It's had a huge impact on education for sure. I'm going to talk about that. And then what is media literacy and how can it help? How can it help young people deal with the changing media landscape? So this is me, that's my wife Kate, and my 3 sons, Liam, Finn, and Milo. This is my dog George. I almost like brought George because we're best buds. He's great. I have an awesome family. I'm really fortunate. I'm really thankful to live in Moscow. It's such a great town to live to raise kids in. So I thought I would start. So this class is a brand new class, and it's been really good for me to actually give this speech because it's made me think, what am I doing? What am I doing with this class? What's the goal of this class? And this class essentially started off with very little framework. The state of Idaho doesn't have any standards for this class, so I'm just trying to figure out what to do, and I'm still figuring that out. And so it's been helpful for me to crystallize. But it initially started out about 2 years ago. The announcements that we play on the intercom, probably remembers this, students don't listen to it very much. And part of it is this attention span shift, whatever, they're just disengaged. So as I said, I was talking to some students at Model UN when we did our trip to Franklin, and I said, why we should just do a video of this. And I had a student teacher that semester, so I took my first period and I went to leadership class and we just made this Good Morning MHS video. So that started out, at this point we're up to 24 episodes, but this year's the first year we have a class dedicated to it, as well as analyzing media. So I thought I would show you, we'll see how this works. This isn't connected to the speaker, so I'm going to take my microphone and just play it over the laptop speaker. And if it doesn't work, we can kind of end it. But I thought you'd get an idea of what kind of media we're producing in this class.
Yes.
I don't hear it all. The Moscow School District Board of Directors recently finalized and approved a new policy. It aims to create an academic-centered environment where all students are healthy and growing by removing outside distractions that detract from the academic missions of our school. This new policy is the first time the board has adopted a district-wide policy. But what does it do? Cell phones are to be powered off, out of sight, and not on your person, with the exception of lunch. Devices that communicate via Bluetooth are not allowed either. Cell phones may be brought to school, but cannot be tucked in clothing and must be in backpacks or lockers. There are exemptions for students. For example, a student that has a medical action plan that requires the use of a cell phone to monitor blood sugar levels. High school students are allowed to use their student-owned devices, but they are required to seek school approval in the office. However, it is still up to teacher discretion whether they can use it. For example, an English teacher may require a Chromebook for a time right. Violation of these rules will result in the confiscation of the cell phone and require a parent or guardian to pick up the device at the office. Only you can prevent screen time. Our new cell phone policy goes into effect March 17th, the Monday after break.
How do we increase the positive uses and decrease the negative uses? Like since phones have come out, increase in depression levels, just addiction to cell phone, and lowers our performance in school for students. Body image issues, there's a lot of issues that come with it that we have to figure out how to mitigate, how to stop. So far, I like our policy now. It sets a uniform standard that solves a lot of problems for me as a teacher.
We have a lot of clubs here at Knoxville High, so let's look at a few of them. Here's Buddy Club and Creative Brand Club. I'm here with Kelly to talk about Buddy Club. What is Buddy Club? Buddy Club is an opportunity for general education students to spend time getting to know students who may have special needs or learn differently. And we have bigger things where students can hang out, we've done cookie decorating, Thanksgiving dinner.
You can still hear that, okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not hard.
It is, yes.
Yeah, so it's pretty fun to get to go. They bring out balls and rings and all kinds of stuff to throw in the water, and there's a warm pool and a deeper pool. So that's awesome. I'm so excited. I know everybody goes. So like,
Sea is the best kind. You can build worlds full of magic, adventures, dragons, anything you want. It's pure imagination.
Y'all are missing out on the real fun. Mystery is where you get to explore the dark arts of the mind.
Did it freeze up?
Yeah.
You know, I think everyone kind of gets the idea, though, that I think everybody gets the idea, though. So I know I appear a little bit in that one. That typically is not the case. So usually I try to keep it as student-centered as possible and simply rein in their creativity, especially this semester. That's been what it is. And then that's about half of the class that I'm doing. Oh, sorry, let me fix this really quick. But we essentially make these videos about once every 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks sometimes. And they've been pretty successful as far as getting students to kind of engage more with what clubs are available at Moscow High, what events are coming up, and those kind of things. For the first part of this, though, I want to focus on kind of why do we have a media literacy class, and how is our state government, our local school district, and how are they adapting to the changes in media? As you saw in the beginning of that was our explanation, and that we're implementing a new policy at Moscow High regarding phones and being a little bit being more strict with our policy. But a lot of this has its roots in a book that came out a year ago called Jonathan Haidt's Anxious Generation, which I think about 3 of you said you read. In this book, Jonathan Haidt he talks about how the average screen time for students right now, so every kid in America, is 7 hours and 22 minutes on a screen, some kind of screen, every day. So that's a lot of time. If they have things where they show how much of that is of your life, that's a significant impact. I mean, we're talking about like how much you sleep, and then phones, what else do you have left, right? And so Jonathan Haidt, a lot of what our school district dealt with, we thought was attributed to COVID. You'll hear like learning loss during COVID, and a lot of that is real. But what Jonathan Haidt points to is that there are a lot of trends that have been going on since about 2007, 2010, that are long-term trends that didn't have a lot to do with COVID. Some of those, according to Jonathan Haidt's book, is misinformation and disinformation, which I'm pretty sure that this group is like fully aware of. We have a kind of a fragmentation of news media. How do we know what's true? How do we know what's happening? Is sort of, we're in the post-truth, fake news. How do we deal with that? And so media literacy is a course that deals with this specifically. We also have, which I was talking to Kathy about, Braver Angels, which specifically deals with this, political polarization. We're at a point where people are locked into a media echo chamber. They're getting information just from who they want to hear it from. And it makes it difficult to have a shared understanding of reality to actually communicate with each other. There's also other aspects of this too, like societal impacts, which is students giving up data, or a really egregious abuse, which Deputy Attorney Keith Scholl talks to my students about, is students sending pictures of themselves naked to each other, and then that being used to blackmail a student and just bully a student. That is something that's happening in every school, and we are not. It also happens in Moscow High School, and then also just being careful, obviously, with how you use your data, what you post online, those kind of things. There's a lot of negative impacts from that. And then the big one that he talks about is mental health. I'm going to show you some data here in a second of the impact that cell phones, specifically social medias, have on young people's mental health. I think it was about 3 years ago, they did a study at Moscow High, and it was revealed that in Moscow High, 1 in 10 students have a suicide plan, which astounded me as a statistic. And I can't speak to exactly how reliable that is, but still, just the fact that we talk about that at like a staff meeting is pretty significant. So Jonathan Haidt, who is this guy? I personally think this book right here, if you haven't read it, I think it's the most significant book of last year. And it's significant not just because of the content, but because of the actual societal impact. Since this book, I think last week it came out a year ago, so does that make sense? It has had a significant impact in how every school in America approaches cell phones. Essentially, he makes some key arguments in this book, which is that young people have a loss of free play. Kids are less likely to be going outside and just kind of unsupervised, just figuring things out. As you can imagine, sort of in how we think of the golden age of America, as kids wandering around. I think of the movie Sandlot, but I don't know what everybody else is thinking of. But you know what I mean? Rise of smartphones and social media, how much time they're on there. A decline in in-person socialization, which can cause sort of a callousness in young people towards, say, new ideas or just saying things for shock value. And I already mentioned impact on mental health. Also, he talks a lot about overprotection and safetyism, that since the 90s, sort of the parenting method is to emphasize safety over allowing kids to kind of figure things out for themselves, which can result in some issues in a democracy, for example, of not knowing how to interact with each other. And you can think how when they grow up, how they talk to each other politically and things like that, it can cause some issues. And he calls all these issues the great rewiring of childhood. So there's two key things here. So smartphones have been out since, I think since 2001 was like the first iPhone. But there's a big shift when the iPhone 3 and 4 came out, which is roughly, I think was 2008.
And as people adopted those specific phones, there's a significant shift. And the other big shift he talks about is on phones, the front-facing camera. So camera on right here. This was a big deal because before that, women and girls were less interested in cell phones. The technological impact was mostly on males, because males tended to be playing video games for long hours in like their parents' basement kind of thing. But when you get the front-facing camera, you have an element of selfies, which made phones more acceptable to both sexes. And so these two things, and so I think front-facing phone is 2012. And so you see these trends, you can see the blue line here, 1825, the increase in anxiety that happens during that time period is a long-term trend. It's not something that COVID started. And so I'm going to show you more charts like this, and you can kind of see the impact that this great rewiring of childhood had. And the great rewiring he describes as the rapid adoption of smartphones, transforming how children and adolescents interact with the world and with each other. So the idea is that before that, children would be more likely to be outside engaging in play and interacting with each other rather than interacting over a cell phone. So we're going to look at some data. This is what I do with students, so I hope that you don't have a lot of social anxiety. I did like basically 5 groups, and I'm going to give you all a different piece of data. And I just want you to look at this data, talk with each other. I mean, I don't really have a timer, but for about 5, maybe 10 minutes if we need it, we'll see. And just see what sort of conclusions you can draw from this data. Okay? 5 could be a group here. Could be yeah. Yes, this one. 4 these. This is 6. 2 groups of 3. Maybe this would be a group. Yeah, I can turn on lights too, so you can kind of see. So just take a look at the data, see what kind of conclusions or questions you can come up with based on this data. Any conclusions or questions that you have? Honestly, when I show this data to students, it's the same reaction. They get really caught up in it. All of you have different data sets, so keep that in mind. There's about 30 pages of stuff here, and this is a supplemental resource from his book. I thought we could go through and just share maybe the key insights or questions that you have. If you look at the bottom of some of the pages, it has a page number, and if you tell me that, I can show it on the big screen here, too. So, if it's okay, could we start with this group? I can also give the microphone so you don't shout. Who's your group speaker? So it's like teaching.
Well, we're kind of interested in why the suicide rates for younger adolescents.
And what page is that, sorry?
And that's page 3.
Okay.
And it says that boys have increased, are more likely, it looks like, to actually commit suicide.
Okay.
So why? That's the question.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, as you can see, so the thing here to keep in mind with this graph, I know it's kind of hard to see, but boys historically have tended to be more likely to commit suicide. Sort of that's a cross-cultural generalization you can make. But what's significant about Jonathan Haidt's data is that even though girls are less likely to commit suicide, the increase has been more significant. So 167% increase for girls, 91% increase for boys. And if some of you have different data, so feel free to share.
Is there anybody from this group, anybody else from this group want to share?
We have a question about the one with the dog. Can you go to that one?
Which page number is that?
Oh gosh, a picture, yeah, we went past this area. So, and then the one below it about playgrounds. This is a playground that we might have done in my youth, which is terribly unsafe.
Yeah.
And as opposed to another playground we saw in our group that was very, very safe. But the dog question. Age 7 months, executing a hairpin turn as we sprint toward a German Shepherd sharply angled into a sprint away, which is followed by a play position and more sprinting toward the larger dog. And all I can think of is, you know, in our first instinct, we want to go somewhere to meet somebody or be with somebody, and then you suddenly realize, oh my gosh, that's a huge dog. I don't want to go there. And then back up, and then you think about it a little more, and you go, oh, I can do this, you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Is that what you're trying to get out of that?
Well, this is my data. This is Jonathan Hight's data. I think that you're exactly right, though. Yeah. So going out to away from your phone is a great way to not have to engage something that you're scared of. But a phone is a great thing to go if you're scared of, say, interacting with somebody in real life or getting a job or whatever the activity is. It's a lot easier just to go to your phone and scroll for 4 hours for a kid. And so they're not overcoming that anxiety. And I think that's what he's showing with this picture of a dog. The dog, it's a mammalian instinct, right? Lynn, did you want to say something?
I just wanted to make a comment
Sure.
regarding the unsafe playground situation. And I am all for safety. However, back in the day, there were ways that kids who are risk takers, inherently, they're going to grow up doing things that are edgy. They need to do that. They have places for that. And so the kids wanting to be safe, we're not the ones on the top. And so, you know, being in front of an audience, playing music, taking on a leadership role, playing sports, all of those things for kids who need that, it's an important piece in terms of development. So I'm all about safety, but I can see where that would have benefited some kids who really needed to do things outside of the box. And other things are not as tempting sometimes. So
That's a really good point. What about D3?
It's on. It should be good. I think
How restricting cell phone use in the classroom can help with all of these anxiety and sadness problems. You know, just because my granddaughter is a freshman and was so upset that she can't even look at her phone to see what time it is. So she was wondering why having these restrictions in high school can help with sadness and anxiety.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't actually make school policies, so it would be a lot more fun if I did. But I would say, I don't know if somebody had this research, but just actually having a phone in a classroom, even in your pocket, they show actually, like, even if it's not your phone, your neighbor has a phone out, actually decreases your test score. And so the issue is, I think for the school district, if we accommodate, you know, hey, I need to call my mom at, you know, during the day and see, you know, whatever the thing is. If we make all those exemptions, we can't have a uniform policy, and then students just get their phones out. They end up suffering academically. Right now, nationwide and in our district, math scores are plummeting, and I would say it's all caused by social media or cell phones, but I think that's a factor. And so I think they had to make a uniform policy to make sure it was enforced. But
I can see the distraction part, but I don't. She doesn't understand the anxiety, and she said, "How can me looking at my phone make me sad?"
yeah, I don't think it does. I think phones are actually a great tool, and that's what's, you know, that video that I showed you at the beginning that students are making, that's made with a cell phone. So I think what's I was going to get to this later, but what we have to be careful of is that we're not creating a moral panic. Like if you think in the 80s, like, oh my gosh, my kid plays Dungeons and Dragons or listens to heavy metal, they're going to become a Satan worshiper or something, right? I think we could go the same route. And so it's a valid criticism. And frankly, I don't know, right now, I think that schools are just being more draconian, for sure. In how we implement. Did your group have anything else you wanted to share?
We have pages, I'm not actually seeing pages. Oh,
It should be at the top. Yeah.
2, them dealt with, anxiety, depression, and a couple of the pages dealt with maybe overprotection by parents.
Okay, and that's 12 and 13.
12, 13.
Right, so some cartoons and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so the list of tag rules.
Yeah.
It's like a constitution. I'll take it. But
One of the things that was interesting that we noted is the more chemical-based mental illnesses, like bipolar, schizophrenia, those haven't been influenced by cell phones. It's the more mood deregulation that have been influenced by cell phones, which totally makes sense because what they see on their cell phone, if it's hurtful, if it's scary, if it's true, not true, really does affect the moods more. And I think it's interesting with the boys who commit suicide more. With girls, they already did more self-harm. And so the percentage increase for girls is less than it is for boys, even though the boys are more. So with boys, they do more attempt suicide. With girls, it's more self-harm. It's more cutting, stuff like that.
that's a really good insight, especially on the movie thing. I never actually thought about that. You guys want to share a little bit?
Oh, you love this one.
The cartoon?
Yeah.
Did you want to use that one or?
Okay, this is, 25.
25?
Well, the parents are saying, it's been so nice getting to interact with you for these past 6 years. Here's your first device.
It's almost as though I was talking to them for 5 years.
Now they don't have to talk to you.
Yeah, no, that's good. Well, it's actually terrible, but it's so true. That's why it's not funny. Yeah. Did you want to share any other ones?
Number 21. Oh, you just had it. That's from 21.
Let's see what you got to say about
Oh, whoops, this one. Here we go.
Oh, on page,
Yeah, he's got it.
okay. That it looks like people are getting discouraged about their futures. Like the percentage of people thinking that they're not gonna have a successful life is going up.
Yeah,
I think that's what we got from that.
that's scary, yeah.
And then the internalizing and externalizing symptoms, this seems so it really doesn't change because the girls went way up on the internalizing and the boys went way down on the externalizing their symptoms. I mean, it seems though as people get older, those things really don't change that much.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a good insight. All right, thanks, you guys. Okay.
I think it's really impressive and discouraging that the girls have really increased in the amount of anxiety that they experience more than the boys, an increase in the amount of anxiety. And on page 5, we've got self-harm episodes, which the girls were already higher, but they went even higher in self-harm episodes than the boys, even though the percentage increase wasn't as great as for the boys, but the girls are way higher than the boys. And then mental health hospitalizations in Australia, girls way higher than the boys. So I think we've got to figure out what's going on with the girls. And then there was one other on page 11. Time spent parenting by mothers. So they don't, in the caption, they don't tell us what's meant by parenting, how they measured that. But I think it's an interesting difference between college educated and less educated moms. in how much time they spend with their kids. And maybe you can tell us how they measured that.
Sure. I actually am not sure about how they measured this exactly. I know he's pulling from good sources. But I also know in the book that Jonathan Haidt really goes, he really talks about helicopter parenting and how technology has exacerbated that. So like helicopter parenting and making sure your kid's always okay. I mean, I grew up in that kind of environment, I think, even. I was like 90s. And then with phones, you have even more. Everything that a child does is supervised and sort of controlled by parents. And so I don't know if we have any like U of I professors, but you know, U of I professors will talk about how they're trying to talk with a student, they'll get a call from the parents. It's like, your kid's in college, like what talking to me right now. The self-harm one, oh sorry, go ahead.
So he's seeing this as a negative thing.
Yes, so he's saying that there's more parenting involvement, which leaves less opportunity for a child to grow up and manage their own affairs. Yeah, and then the other one on the women, the girls, shoot, what page was that on? Oh, the UK and Australia, he incorporates this because if there's any science teachers, you know, you don't want to attribute all the problems of the world to one cause. That's usually not the case. There's usually several variables. But he's talking about that the one thing that the UK, Australia, and the United States have in common is the introduction of the cell phone and how it's across Western democracies. And so that's another point in there. Did you watch it?
Well, it just occurs to me that there's a lot of discussion and description about the different generations. And of course, the cell phone is going to have a huge effect on the generation where it was introduced, the generation where it became this essential part of one's daily life, such that, I mean, you know, it sort of facilitates that kind of over-parenting. I mean, my experience as a parent was, I would call it a benign neglect. Okay, kids, outside, see you later. You know, and yet now, today, it's something very.
Yeah. That's great. How about this last group? Here you go.
Page 19. There's a lot of talk about the self-image of young women, and this picture just really explained it to me finally. The lower right is an actual picture of this girl, and the other three are fake AI improvements. And so if every girl is looking into her phone to see what she could or should look like instead of what most people actually do look like, I finally get why this is such a big deal.
Yeah, and I think that's always been the case as far as like magazines, you know, since the 50s, the unrealistic beauty standards. But when you have an AI generating what it considers to be the perfect person or whatever, there's no way you ever measure up, which is why we have.
But not just the perfect person, but the perfect you.
Yeah, it's you. I could look like that, but I don't. So you have this, you can see why self-harm rates, those kind of things would increase in girls more than boys because of the introduction of the front-facing camera, and not to mention AI apps that can create that. So, yeah. Okay, that was all actually really good observations here. Let me just kind of land it. So, so obviously as states, school districts are adopting policies to deal with a very serious issue, they're frankly not going to get it right, but they are adopting some kind of policy. And like as we mentioned, like why can't this student who's perfectly well behaved, does a great job, why can't they have their phone out? They're not the ones using it for 7 hours and 7 hours 22 minutes a day. They're not letting it get ruin their academics. But school districts and states are creating a blanket policy for everybody. And so, I already did a discussion. I did talk about moral panic. So what happens when you start creating policies around this stuff, which, you know, like when Elvis came out and shook his hips, it was like, ban rock music, you know what I mean? And so we have kind of the same thing. So like when I was a kid, it was dare to keep kids off drugs. As soon as that program was introduced, the drug usage for my generation increased. And so I made this, I have this hanging in my room. I also have a Smokey the Bear one as well, like only you can prevent screen time. But this idea of like, is this where things are going? Which I don't necessarily think is good either. And so that is one pushback on Jonathan Haidt, is we need to be careful on how we approach this. We're moving maybe too quickly. But also, it is a serious issue. A couple other pushbacks on Jonathan Haidt's data here is sort of correlation versus causation. Just because these trends are happening, it doesn't necessarily mean it's the cell phone. There's also, say, for example, just off the top of my head, is like change in diets, how much processed food a young person eats. I mean, that probably would have an impact on your mood, for example, or depression, anxiety. And so you do want to keep that in mind. Also, he really gets into over-parenting and the helicopter parent thing, which I personally have seen as a teacher, but maybe he overestimates it. And so those are some things that we should be careful with. I thought I would show you, though, exactly what our communities are doing, because I think that's a good takeaway, and then I can take some questions from you guys, or if you just want to have a general discussion, that's great. So how our community is interacting is based off of what Jonathan Haidt proposes. And this has made its way into every state legislature. Australia, for example, has banned social media for anyone under the age of 16. So we're seeing policies like that come out, and even in states. My son right now is down at Teen Pact. It's like a mock legislature kind of thing. And he's actually proposing a cap on screen time, that anybody from 13 to 18 can only look at screens for 3 hours, which is hilarious because he plays Fortnite way more than that. So Jonathan Haidt, he says, this is how we fix everything. And when he came out with that, it's like, oh, that's a great idea, but no one will actually do this. And his is more of a holistic approach as far as parenting and policy. One of them is no smartphones before high school. So that's a big one. My son has a gap phone. I'm not a poster child of following these, by the way. Like, I grew up playing probably more video games than most, I would say. But no smartphones before high school, so my kids have a gap phone. It's basically for texting and calling. There's no other apps on there. No social media before 16, which Australia literally implemented as a policy across their country. So no Instagram, no TikTok, no X, no even Facebook. More independence and free play. Uh-oh. Is that my computer? Oh no. I thought it was plugged in back here. I am plugged in. Look at this. It's right here. Oh. It's okay if I don't quite get to it. We'll see if we make it. More independence and free play. So I think about this. I walk to work every day. I didn't have a second vehicle until about a year ago. But there's nobody outside. You're walking somewhere, like you're walking through our suburbs, there's nobody out there. It's kind of weird to think about. I don't know what it's like in the 50s, say, or something, but imagine there's people outside. I hear stories. People talk about, like, I was watching the neighbor's kid, can you believe Billy or neighbor did that? You know, they're aware of what's going on outside. And so one thing that I think would be big is creating more infrastructure around encouraging kids to go out and have unsupervised play, which is scary. There's a lot of scary things out there. But one point Jonathan Haidt brings up is that actually most of the scary stuff is here. It's very rare you're going to run into sort of that 70s idea of like a person, you know, in a van passing out candy, getting kids to get into the van. That person is on social media. So it's more of like, how do we get kids outside? It's probably safer outside than it is being on the phone, frankly. And how do we walk that line? How do we make sure our equipment isn't super unsafe? You know, I think of the merry-go-round when I was a kid was super, there's kids getting thrown off that thing. That is like most of my island. What's that merry-go-round? More sleep. Kids stay up looking at phones. They doom scroll. You're just scrolling. Less screen time at night. Taking phones out of the room. Having a place in your house that's like, okay, we're going to charge the phone out here. Kids do not access it after 8 o'clock. Those are sort of his big policies. The state of Idaho. What has the state of Idaho done? The state of Idaho created the Phone Free Learning Act. That's an executive order by Brad Little. I think he gave school districts $5,000 incentive for creating a cell phone policy. Our school did that, but they didn't do it because of the incentive. So it was actually because it was seen, research shows it's better to have a pretty strict cell phone policy right now. And that's why our school district did it. I'm not defending the school district at all. I think it was a good move to come up with something. The other one is digital literacy graduation requirements. This includes teaching kids, this is a new credit requirement, has not been signed by the governor, but has moved through the Senate and the House at this point. Sorry, let's keep me focused. Oh, there it goes. I can still give you guys this. Well, if I unplug it to plug it to charge it, it's going to disconnect it from here anyway. So I can just give it to you though. I'm not too worried about it. There's 5 sort of things it focuses on. It's technical skills, so how to use technology, computer science, programming, information literacy, how to dissect misinformation, disinformation, fake news. The third one is digital communication skills. How do we communicate using technology? Critical thinking, how do we analyze the data and information coming in from these new mediums? And safety and responsibility. Those are the 5 tenets that Idaho is pushing in these new digital literacy standards. Yes?
What was number 5?
Safety and responsibility. Some of those standards are kind of silly. It's like, don't post a picture on Facebook of yourself partying. It's like a standard. It's like, be careful with what you share on social media. Like, I feel like we know, but it is an important thing to cover. So it's important to know this has not been signed by the governor, but it probably will be. And originally, this was the dumb part of Idaho. It's the only thing that's bad about Idaho legislation, I'm just showing. Is that the Idaho legislature wanted to make it as a replacement for communication class. That's speech class.
What?
Yes. They're like, we need more practical, classes like CT. You know what you live in? Speech. Who uses that? So it's great. So that was a big pushback. So now what they've done is they're creating these digital literacy standards. It's probably going to be added to what we currently have, which is good actually. I think we should have some digital literacy standards now. Yeah.
But are they going to give you more money, more long?
No. That's funny. No. Yes. I actually don't know. I mean, I don't think so. So my class right now, I'm not a CTE, career and technical educator, so I get very little money. The money that I've gotten has been just the district had extra. We're not using video equipment. Ironically, we're using a cell phone to film stuff in class. I have about probably $300 of equipment. If I was CTE, I would have MacBook, I'd have all kinds of stuff, but I'm not gonna go back to college for 20 credits or get a job in like video production. But who was the question here?
I'm wondering if that class could be offered to adults.
Yeah.
Seriously?
No.
That's a huge thing for adults.
With Kathy, what Braver Angels is doing as far as, I teach my kids how to talk to each other in post 2016 or whatever. I think digital literacy and talking to each other are the key things that would help.
For me, right now, to try to look up information, I don't have any idea how to know if it's true or not. If anything online, I do not trust, and so adults do need a class like that.
It's currently in the United States, 36%, I'm going off the cuff, but, so we take Finland and Japan. About 76% of them trust the mainstream media. For Japan, that's Yahoo. They go to Yahoo still, and they go to the front page, and everyone's like, oh, this is what's happening. They don't question it. That's it. Finland has the strongest media literacy program in the world. They have the best education program in the world also. But part of that is Russian propaganda coming in. They have to figure out ways to mitigate that. So they have a solid understanding what's true or not. Americans, it's about 34%.
Whoa.
And it's split like Democrat and Republican. I think Republicans are 12%, and Democrats are like 40-something%. Yeah, but it's even hard to sometimes trust like a quality journalism. You're not sure. There's stories that will get shelved, and I'm not saying just Republican or Democrat. I think it's across the spectrum. So now people are like, oh, I can't trust, Walter Cronkite anymore. What do I trust? And then they'll be like, I'm just gonna listen to Joe Rogan podcast and just believe whatever he says. Or, you know what I mean? Or even whatever. I'm trying to think of a left-leaning version. But yeah, they'll just.
Rachel Maddow?
Yeah, let's go. Rachel Maddow, whatever she says, gospel's truth. That's what I believe. And we don't have a common way to communicate with each other either. Yeah.
What do you think about media bias charts?
Yeah, I think they're biased. No.
No, I'm wondering about that, really.
No, that Fonte's media bias chart, it put Alex Jones, Alex Jones in InfoWars, it says, whatever. He's at the very bottom right. But what's funny is Alex Jones made his own media bias chart, and it was like corporate owned and tyrannical or something. He put at Fonte's on his media bias chart. I think it's actually useful to look at. I show my students that.
Okay.
I feel like it's pretty fair. It puts like CNN and Fox are both kind of more editorial, but left and right. I think MSNBC is more like the left-leaning Fox. Then it has like Wall Street Journal, New York Times, so kind of top, and then AP sort of the center. And so I feel like that's pretty.
And then it has levels of truth.
Yeah.
From the bottom to the top too.
Yeah, so reliability. So if you haven't seen this, it's like left, right spectrum. And then the top is reliability, the bottom is like not fact-based. And then it kind of places everything on this chart.
Where is it?
It's called at Fontes. AD, so I think that's just a Latin, what is it, the word, right? Or something like that. There's another one, all sides is another one. But that's the thing, so when I take my students through it, I don't look at those, but I also want to question those too. And that's what's tricky, is the students are looking at media, it's like, well, how do we know we should have an attitude of skepticism towards any kind of news. And we should, when we get information, oh, these are words the Trump administration banned, or whatever the thing is right now. Okay, well, where did they get that information? And what are other news sources saying? That should be our default position, and that's where I try to get students to. Even before you read an article, it's called lateral reading. It's a really good tool. Is before you even read an article, you open up another browser tab and research who's behind that article. And that's one thing that I focus on. Yeah?
Isn't it becoming a problem though with science? Because people now don't believe science. And science kind of works, and you learn something and then you do some more research and realize, no, that's wrong. So how is that spilling over to science?
I think there's general distrust by American people overall in all of our institutions right now. And I don't know how to solve it. If I did, I would be speaking like a marina. Yeah.
Two questions.
Sure.
Your class now is elective, and I'm just curious as to how many students sign up for it, and if these graduation requirements are adopted, does it mean that your class will become mandatory?
That's such a good question. Right now, I capped it off at 14 students in this class because we are producing media and consuming media.
14?
14.
How did you get a?
Well, my government costs like 25, so that balances out. But we don't know. We don't have a policy, but I know that Mr. Perryman, our principal, is looking at how do we just incorporate these standards into other classes. Because I think the last thing he wants to do, and frankly, the last thing he wants to do is make a new class. We don't have very much room over there. So in hiring a new FTE, which as you brought up, are they going to provide that money? Also, like, who has a degree in media studies right now that can be hired for that class? So also students being forced to take it is different than students being allowed to take it. If I have a bunch of students, I would change the course radically. And maybe as a closing, and then we can, I think we're past, I don't know, but 55, perfect. I'll kind of land, I talked a little bit about what State Live is doing with digital literacy standards. At the beginning of this, I showed you kind of what Moscow High is doing. So Moscow High has created phones that can be powered off in their backpack. This is a district-wide policy. At the high school, they can have it out at lunch, unless they have a 504 plan, which is like, say they have like diabetes, and you check it. The other thing is, just kind of as far as my philosophy goes on this course, media literacy is a huge buzzword. UI is offering a new major in media literacy. Schools across the country are using it. The class that I'm teaching over there, mine's different because they tend not to emphasize media creation. So in my view, you can think of like a yin-yang. I see observing media on one side, like how do we critically think about media going into our brains? But then the other side is how do we make it? So how do we make videos? How do we make content online? Because I guess I'm thinking about, okay, as I read this article, what was the person thinking that made this article? What is their agenda and how are they trying to influence me? Because they get to see that in real time. So my class is a week on of we're producing media, and then a week of analyzing media. So this lesson I just did with you, I'll be doing that kind of next week. They'll look at the data and we'll talk about, okay, what kind of cell phone policy should Moscow School District implement? Is this one good? And yeah, so that's, I guess, that's to close out. But are there any other questions? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm wondering, so this is a little subversive maybe.
Sure, good.
So we're saying we're gonna take the cell phones out of the classrooms, and other than what you're doing, what's the possibility of using the cell phones as a teaching method in the class so that they have, if they're gonna be looking at their phones anyway, why not use that as a method of teaching in person with you? Is that a possibility, or is that just?
I think that goes in the moral panic aspect. So the first reaction, Wikipedia comes out, hey guys, we need, unlimited free information for every human on Earth. The reaction of libraries and schools there is like, no, don't use it. It's all biased, it's lying to you. You know what I mean? Even though research shows Wikipedia is more reliable, or as reliable as Encyclopedia Britannica. So I think the first reaction is, oh no, shut Pandora's box. The second thing is that public education is such a huge ship. If somebody gets up, they turn the wheel, you don't see sort of the effects for years. I personally, so what I've done is I've given students a media literacy badge. They can go around and film stuff. And I see them, when they're not abusing phones, they produce amazing things using their phones. Amazing, funny videos. Even stuff that we put on our Instagram account is hilarious. They're really good at it. And so we don't want to set policies up that prevent them from not being prepared for the 21st century. So I totally agree with you. I don't think that's I think that's a question we should have. The other thing though is that we also have students that just straight up abuse social media. We have students that are like, oh, I have an essay due tomorrow, I'll just send this through ChatGPT. It'll type the essay up for me. Oh, I can't turn it in because the teacher will recognize it. Well, I'm going to put this essay through an AI that makes it sound more like a human. It gets humanized, and then they submit that as an essay. And so when we have a 50% plus students doing that, we're like, well, we gotta, I'm not saying that's what it is, but you know what I mean, we have a lot of students using AI. We have to say, well, okay, we don't know how to use this well, so we're just not allowing it. I think that, and I think it's a survival mechanism. I mean, imagine being an English teacher right now, and AI comes out. I mean, what are you gonna do? It's like, you want students to learn the process of writing, strengthen writing muscles. The analogy I used earlier is like, you don't go to the gym with a forklift and have it lift weights for you. That's not gonna work. So, yeah, so I don't know, schools are figuring out how to deal with these things. Yeah.
I think sort of the flip side of that, though, is in some ways, the more the emphasis is on technology, the more it exacerbates the divide between students who have parents who can afford it all and students who, can't, and that came out in the pandemic when you had kids going someplace else to hook up to Wi-Fi to, get into their class. So I think there has to be a balance there.
We see a huge low socioeconomic status students. suffered the most from both this and from COVID. Yeah, that's definitely the case. Are there any questions?
We're at time, what time? So if you
Oh,
want
sure.
to continue, I mean,
So we keep going.
you can, but if anybody has to leave, that's fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, we can continue, just at 1 o'clock, so, if it's okay.
Okay,
with
but
you.
so is it, you're saying it's.
It's 1 o'clock, and
It's
it's
1 o'clock.
time, but if you are willing to continue, if people want to stay, then that's fine.
Yeah, I'm happy if,
Okay.
go for it.
Well, my concern was because recently our legislature has decided that they will fund, private schools.
Yep.
Are you thinking that, this sort of, divide that you were just mentioning between, lower economic status children and those who are, privileged, will, become worse? I know it's not directly having to do with media.
Yeah, well, it's kind of weird. It's kind of a two-part because we kind of think wealthier people do go to private schools, but also like Logos, for example, has very little technology also, and very strict. So there's no cell phones. There hasn't been, and so I think actually probably a Logos student probably is not experiencing these things as much as a Moscow student. And I think that's due to a lot of variables. That's due to the school, also the sort of the family culture being less open to introducing the cell phone. I think maybe that's why it's important though too that public schools have a maybe boundaries around technology too, and why I think I support the district moving that way too. Yeah.
There's a related question. There was an article recently, many of the quote private schools in the state only go to 8th grade.
Mhm.
So those students are going to wind up in the public high schools. It's not like Logos, which does go all the way through. But what is going to be the situation of the high schools when you have this variety of students that come from a Catholic school and a private school and a home school, and they get dumped on you in high school?
Yeah, I think this is outside my expertise a little bit. I would say at Moscow High we get a diverse group of students coming in. So if you think about Coos Prairie, that only goes 8th grade. St. Mary's only goes 8th grade. We get Logos kids coming in. So I think we deal with that now. But I think having common expectations that are very clear for the staff and the students is, at our high school, in any school, I think having a clear policy and a clear common expectation is always better than not, in my opinion. But yeah.
So how are you going to catch those students up?
I don't know. I feel like that's not immediate. That's just been happening,
I used to be a high school teacher 100 years ago.
Right. Yeah, there's always that gap. Yeah. Is there any other questions? Thank you for having me speak. It was really fun. It was really fun hanging out with you guys and talking about this. I hope you guys enjoyed it and maybe you got some thought-provoking nugget. If you want to use this on your own kids or your grandkids, any of this stuff. Sorry, yeah. I'll come around and talk to everybody. If that's okay at this point.
Thank you.